Welcome everybody to the August 12th budget review meeting. Amber, if we could please do a roll call, please.
Waugh. Here. Martinson. Here. Waker. Costello.
Here.
LaCroix.
Here.
Chapman. Here. Olson. Weifenbach.
Here.
Kroger.
Here.
Adcock. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Amber. First thing on the agenda is water and wastewater, and I'll recognize Robert Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, we're going to finish up Public Works today. We'll do water, wastewater, and solid waste. And just want to recognize three very good employees the city has that work in the Public Works Department. For water, you've got your Water Superintendent, John Wagner. For your Water Reclamation Division, you have Dave Van Cleve. And then finally, for solid waste, you have Jerry Wright. Three solid employees that help me on a day-to-day basis and do great things for the city. So I just want to take a second to recognize them. Diving right into water, again, I'll try to highlight some of the important items that you see within the budget. Overall, for the water enterprise, it's a 2.6% increase. I will highlight that that does not include the bonding that we will be getting underway here for the Jackson Springs water treatment plant. So reiterate, that does not include any of the bonding for the Jackson Springs plant. So without that, we're looking at a 2.6% increase. Diving a little bit deeper into the water rec, I'll start off with the 7011, the water production sub-funding category. Some of the things worth noting there, if you notice under 4264 janitor and chemical, that is down 16.7% over last year. Actually, it falls a little bit more in line with what we've done historically in the past. That's a result of utilizing some cheaper polymers that we've been able to purchase over the past year, and also a slight change in the source water that we're using. Another item worth mentioning, well, I think that about covers it for 7011, any major increases. So if there's any questions, I can entertain those for 7011. Moving on to 7012, that's the water collection and distribution. This is essentially the water that runs out in the streets within the right-of-way. If you take a look at that overall sub-funding budget, it is down 6.8%. We'll highlight one item within there, and that is item 4360, machinery and auto equipment. That's down $113,000, and essentially that's a result of some newer equipment that we do have that we've purchased over the last few years. So it appears we have a pretty good fleet working into the future.
Robert, you said that was down 7.1%. Is that what total on that one?
Yes, that would, for the 7012, which was water collection and distribution, down 6.8%.
6.8?
Yes.
Okay.
And if there's any questions, I can take those, or I could move on to 7013. 7013, water administration. This is essentially our the help that we have at the front desk. It also includes some salaries, such as John Wagner's. That is up less than 1%. It's 0.7% increase, relatively minor increase, and just a couple of different line items that increased just a little bit. It's not a very big funding budget subcategory, so nothing really to speak of there. Under 7014, our water billing, we do all of our billing for water, sewer, and garbage under the water billing division of water.
Lloyd.
Now,
Oh. Deb, I'm going to recognize Deb Hadcock. She has a question.
Thank you, Council President Lloyd. Just a question: is the city charged for water, or how do we do our water bills for like the public buildings and stuff?
We, I might have to rely on John Wagner for that. I'm not sure if we have a uniform policy for all of our city buildings and facilities. John?
Yeah, I'd have to check with finance. I know some of the other departments pay, like fire department, I'm assuming they're paying for their domestic use. I think possibly the Parks Department's paying for some of the domestic use. The types of facilities like the swimming pools that generate revenue, I believe they're paying for their water, but on an individual basis, I'd have to look into see which ones were paying, which ones weren't.
Maybe we could have the information later just to kind of see that if we could. I appreciate that.
We'll
Thank
get
you.
that. Very good, we'll get that information. Just make a quick note here.
I'll recognize Jim Preston.
Thank you. Yesterday, you asked for interdepartmental charges, and I believe Pauline's putting all that together as far as who gets charged what, and that'll show up as far as the water, what they
Well,
get
that'll be,
charged into.
that'll be in the
If
interdepartment
it's
charges.
not, we'll try to come up with something, but I believe that will be on there. And if you don't hear anything from us, don't do it.
Okay, carrying on, 7014 water billing, again, that was a 2.8% increase. There is no one item within that budget that shows a substantial increase, just a lot of little increases within that.
I do have another light, Robert. I'll recognize Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this question could be taken now or later, but my question is, what was the overall increase in water rates and sewer and everything that we took for the funding and for traditional percentage-wise? What is that percent?
It really depends on which customer class you're talking about. I believe that if I remember my numbers right, for the average single-family user, the new rates that went into effect this year, the average bill went from $24.10 up to close to $28. It's about a $4 increase, but I can provide the exact percentages or dollar
I
amount.
can figure that out. Thank you.
Very good. Moving on to water bonds, which is 9049. And that actually, we retire the only debt payment that we have this year. In, I believe, December of this year, we pay off the final payment on an SRF loan. It was a bond, okay. So we'll pay that off at the end of this year for the Madison wells, I understand. But we will enter into a new debt repayment structure with the bonding we do for the Jackson Springs treatment plant. So when you take a look at the 9049 water bond, you actually see it's down $688,000, and that zeroes out to zero. Moving on to 933, which is the water replacement and improvement category. These are essentially our capital improvements that we do for existing infrastructure. And that shows an increase of 4.9%, and that equates to $253,000 increase over 2009. And those are the projects that we do throughout the city on an annual basis. And then the final funding category that I have under water is the 934. That's the water expansion. That's what I call the new development. And if you take a look at that, that's a 31.3% increase. And I'm actually missing the last page of that, so I can't speak to what that actual dollar amount is. That would be a $590,000 increase over last year. And this is for the installation of new reservoirs, booster stations, extension of any transmission mains out into undeveloped areas of town. That's primarily what the 934 budget is. And that would conclude water, if there are any questions.
I don't see any questions, Roberts.
Okay, very good. I'll move on to water reclamation. Water reclamation, this entire Division of Public Works will see a 10.8% decrease over 2009. I will move into the individual funding categories. The 7071 is where I'll start. That's the water reclamation, distribution, and collection. Again, that's the pipes out in the street, the lift stations, everything that collects the sewer that's generated. That overall has a 2.1% increase over last year. If you take a look at item 4264, janitor and chemical, you'll see that that has a 76% increase, which is a little over $28,000 increase over last year. And that is primarily the odor control chemicals that we put in at our lift stations. We have a couple of new lift stations that have come online, and they do take chemicals to operate those. So we're seeing an increase in that for 2010. And that's really the only large increase to speak of within that funding category. Move on to 7072, that's water reclamation treatment. That's the treatment plant that we have. That shows a 1.7% increase over last year. A couple of items that I'll highlight here. That would be item 4285, propane, heating fuel, and oil is showing a 178% increase over last year. The reason for that is we're going to be doing a project to make improvements to our digester facility out at the water reclamation facility. And we actually, what we do with the digesters, we collect all of the methane gas that comes off of raw sewage, and we utilize that gas for our processes. So when that's under construction, we won't have the availability of that methane gas. We'll have to bring in some propane to keep our processes operating. So because of that, we'll have to increase our budget $38,000 for 2010. We also have a couple of other items under buildings and structures, which is 4320. We're showing that as a decrease of 60% over last year. We did some significant improvements in 2009 out at the water reclamation facility. We just have a few other improvements that we want to do in 2010. We have some roof repair to do, rotary drum improvements, and then some sludge, some heating for the sludge building. And that's also, if you look under 4360, machinery and auto equipment, you'll see that that is a pretty significant increase over 2009. And what we're doing there is UV system improvements, and then also purchasing a van for our electricians. If they have a very old van that's not very appropriate for their use. So those are some of the improvements that we're doing at the water treatment plant. Next, I'll move on to 7073, and that's the water reclamation lab and the pretreatment program. We have a small lab out at the treatment plant. We're required to do reporting and testing to the state and to the EPA. And then we also have a pretreatment program that we go out, and some of our industrial users, we just have to check the sewage that they have, make sure there's no heavy metals, other types of pollutants that we can't treat. And that's how those are funded out of this sub-funding category. This shows an overall increase of 3%. It's a fairly small budget, and the reason for the increase is we are purchasing some new equipment at our lab, $19,000 worth of, I think, a couple of refrigerators that we use for our lab testing, and then there's also some other miscellaneous equipment. Now we conclude that subcategory. I can move on to 7074, which is the septic program, the source water protection program. That's the tank inspection that we do, and that actually shows a 6.6% decrease. Again, this is a very small funding category. Actually, it's about $70,000, and the decrease are just some minor items across the board. There's nothing really that jumps out at me on this one, just a few $100s here and there. Without any questions, I'll move on to the final two in sewer.
I do have, I do have a question. Now I recognize Alderman Bill Wall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Robert, there's no salaries then for 10 for the septic inspection?
I recognize Robert.
Mr. Waugh, there actually are. I think what's going on here, and Pauline, you're going to have to help me out with this one, but it has to do with interdepartmental charges. I think what we're doing is everything is pretty much staying the same, but we're handling it through an interdepartmental charge. Pauline, can you help me?
What's that one?
This would be Louis Arweo is essentially what it is, septic system program.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. It looks like they're bringing it in through interdepartmental.
Mr. President, if I may.
Yes.
What happened is we're actually paying for Louis' salary out of Public Works Administration and then charging it back to the septic program.
Okay.
So, could I still have this for? So, for '07, we paid 31,000, '08, 24,000, we have budgeted 48,000. So, and then you move over to the last page. So of that 70 or 61,000, part of that is salary then?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Very good. Moving on to 833, and this is the wastewater reclamation improvements. This is essentially existing infrastructure improvements that we make through our capital improvement program. This actually shows a 32.1% decrease. I believe that translates into $1.8 million decrease over last year. It still leaves $4 million in there for those improvements. And then the final category that I have is the 834, and that would be the wastewater expansion program, and that is a 31.3% increase. That equates to an increase of $628,000, which ultimately means that in 2010, if approved, this would be $1.5 million for expansion projects. And that would conclude wastewater. Moving on to solid waste division. Three subcategories here. I will start off with the 7101, which is the collection. This is the garbage trucks going out and picking up all the refuse across town. This actually shows a 10.5% increase over 2009, and I'll highlight just a couple of items in here. If you take a look at 4251, repair of rolling stock, that is actually a decrease of 19%, and that's the result of some newer equipment that we've purchased over the last couple of years. We actually had a pretty aging fleet in all three of divisions of the solid waste, and we're going to see those decrease because we're actually going to be purchasing new solid waste trucks here in the near future. So that should go down. We're also showing under something worth highlighting, 4410 and 4420. This is the debt service. As we've discussed in Public Works Committee, we'll be replacing our entire garbage truck fleet here in 2010. We'll do doing the advertising authority now, but we'll do the purchase in 2010. And we'll structure that over a 7-year loan option, and the payment on that will be about $332,000 for principal, $60,000 for interest. So close to $400,000. So you'll see that within the budget, and that's the largest reason for the increase in that funding category.
I do
Yes.
have a light on. I'll recognize Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Just a question. When I was talking about land and how much it went up yesterday, it was $2,012,700. Robert, why did they classify the landfill gas recovery system, the flare system, closure of landfill cell, and expansion of cell in? Do you know why they put it in with the land purchases?
You know, I guess we kind of went round and round on that. We thought that those were improvements to the land. We're collecting the gas that is in the land, and so we just tied it to the land under the line item. And we could have put it someplace else. That's where we ended up deciding to put it. Creating a new cell, closing the cell, we just felt they were all related to the land.
There isn't any. Okay, I guess I'm not understanding that, but at least we know where the money is and why it's there. Thank you.
Very good. Moving on to 7102, which is solid waste disposal. And this actually shows a 44% increase in this subcategory. I'll go over those. I think some of those are what we were just discussing. If you take a look at 4223 consultant services, you will see that that is $200,000, which is a $150,000 increase over last year. The reason for that, again, we're doing several projects. We're doing the leachate remediation, landfill gas, we're opening a new cell, and then we're closing a cell. So we've got quite a few projects out there that will be utilizing some expertise from the consultant field to help us through those projects. And those are all requirements of the state. These are not projects that we're just kind of willy-nilly choosing to do. We're required to do these. Another one worth pointing out, and we just spoke about this, 4310 land. If you see that, it's $1.7 million increase over 2009 for a total budget of just over $2 million. Again, that was for the landfill gas collection. It's also for opening the cell and then closing the cell out there. And we just made the decision to tie that to the land is the reason it's in that category. Machinery and auto equipment, 4360. You see that that's actually goes down quite a bit, 74% decrease. And again, that's a result of some newer equipment that we bought in 2008 and 2009. So we get to retire some of that fleet maintenance expense that we've incurred over the years because of an aging fleet. And that would conclude disposal. Barring any questions, I'll move into the MRF, the recycling facility, and that's the 7103. And that actually shows a decrease of 0.3%, so just as a minor increase. Again, we have newer equipment that we're utilizing at the MRF, 4253. You can see there is a decrease of $30,000, and we attribute that to having a newer fleet. The only other thing worth highlighting here is at 4320, building and structures. You'll see there's $250,000 request there for 2010. And that's to make some improvements to the mechanical equipment and machinery inside the MRF. This is the, not vehicle equipment, but actual moving parts of the recycling facility. It's time to start making a few improvements and repairs to the equipment that we have out there. And that would conclude solid waste.
Thank you, Robert. I'd just like to extend my thanks to you and your department, John and David and Jerry, for all the work that you guys do. And keep up the good work. I don't see any lights unless any council members have a question or comment they'd like to make. See none.
Very good, thank you.
Good job, folks. Next, we have Kevin Tome and Company. Are you waiting on a few people, Kevin?
They're coming, so
Okay.
we
Yeah,
can,
you
we
can
can
go
start, or if you want to break,
Sure.
either way. Would you like me to go ahead and start? Would you like me to go ahead and start, or?
Yes, you can go ahead and start, Kevin.
Okay. Well, thank you. What I intended to do is just take a few minutes and kind of run through community resources and some of the things that have been going on the past year, and then run through the budget, and then, like the other departments, just open it up for questions at the end. You should have this handout up there. We put it on each of your places up there on the dais if you don't have it. I just wanted to run through this with you real quick.
Yeah, I don't have it. Legal finance probably took it.
It should have been, or you know what, maybe Mary's bringing the copies yet. You don't have them up there yet?
No, we don't have those.
She's bringing them up. Can we wait just 1 minute till she gets here?
Sure.
Because I want to walk through these with you.
We can wait.
You can give me about a couple minutes.
Yeah, we're about a half hour ahead of schedule
Yeah.
now.
I only have about 10 minutes for you, so. Would you give one to Amber? Pardon? Give one to Amber so she has one. Okay, now you have the handout. If you guys are ready, I'm ready now. I just wanted to walk through this, and some of this you saw in the mayor's budget presentation, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. But the first page just gives you the org chart for community resources. The next page lays out the budget. It's taken a couple of years for the budget to kind of shake out and stabilize in the whole consolidation. And that accounts for about 25.5 FTEs in community resources. The third page back is human resources. I'm not going to go through all the data unless you have specific questions, but I did want to mention that we did start taking applications electronically last fall, about last October, and that's been a huge success. All of our applications are taken electronically, with the only exception being the stock show, because we hire so many in such a short period, and most of them are just temporary for a week or two. But it's been hugely successful. And one of the stats on there, we had 43,000, almost 44,000 hits to that website, and we processed almost 7,000 applications. So if we have one position and 100 people apply for it, Human Resources vets those first, and say there's 50 that don't meet minimum qualifications, then those are sent notices you don't meet minimums. Then the other 50 are sent on to the department director or division manager. Then they go through the interview process and hiring process. They don't even see the ones that don't meet the minimum.
So everybody that does apply electronically gets a notice?
Pardon?
Everybody that applies gets a notice whether they were declined, didn't meet?
That's correct.
Okay.
Then the next page, information and technology. And again, I'm not going to run through all the stats, but I did want to just kind of recap a few things. And the IT consolidation started about 20 months ago. Jim Cook hit the ground. I came in October of 2007. Jim Cook was our IT officer. He came in November. Of course, Jim left us after about a year because he had cancer and since passed away from his cancer. But Jim really put us on the path we needed to be on and sent us down the right road on the consolidation. And we had to regroup after he left and pick up the pieces. And I really feel like we've stabilized in our policies and our practices and in our equipment. And the city was really headed for a train wreck a couple of years ago, and the consolidation's been a good thing. I think there's a lot of efficiency that are gained, and there's better practices that are gained, and it's been beneficial to the city as a whole. At Legal and Finance today, you saw the GIS update, which is part of the IT department, and they rolled out the new version of RapidMap, and again, Don Jarvin, our GIS coordinator, is here. He did that presentation at Legal and Finance. He was modest. He said it's the best system between Minneapolis and Denver, GIS system. I think our rivals are better than what's in Minneapolis or Denver on the research I've done. So kudos to the GIS division. RapidMap's a huge success in our community. And like Don said today, and I didn't realize the history, it was originally Marcia Elkin's brainchild a number of years ago, and it's grown into a huge success. And that is a joint venture with the city-county. When you look in the budget, the county provides about $100,000 a year into the GIS. And I guess from the IT standpoint, I just want to say thanks to the mayor and the council for the support you've given in terms of FTE and dollars. IT had been under-resourced for a number of years in the city. Jim Cook said when he came from St. George, Utah, that we were 7 to 10 years behind before he got here. After he got here, he said, you're further than 10 years behind. I think we've made up a lot of that ground. We still have a ways to go, but we've made up a lot of that ground in the last 20 months. The next page is just some email statistics you saw with the mayor. I'm not going to talk about those. The next page after that is the Community Development Division. I'm trying to figure out how to clone Barb Garcia. Barb's just a huge asset to our department and to the city as a whole. She does more traffic control with all the nonprofits and the other government entities that are out there than anybody else in the city when it comes to all the different programs. And those are listed on that sheet, the different duties that she does and some of the programs she's involved in. And those of you that have worked with her know she's tireless and is here on nights and weekends. And like I say, if we could figure out how to clone her, we would. The next page is code enforcement. The next 3 pages will talk about code enforcement. And this is from 2008, for calendar year 2008, the statistics. Did 2010 total inspections. An inspection means, we get a call or we see a violation. we get a call, we go out, inspect it, send the notice, and then sometimes that's the end of it. Sometimes you may have multiple, it could be 5, 10, 15 visits back to one residence or dealing with one violation, but we count it as one inspection. 40 of those result in an abatement, meaning that we went out and actually cleaned up the property because the property owner wouldn't clean it up. If you go to the next page for 2009, so far this year we've done 1,240. If my math is correct, that'll be 2,480 by the end of the year if we stay on that same pace, which would be 470 more than we did last year. And so far we've done 25 abatements, which again, if we stay on task, that'd be 50 this year compared to 40 last year.
How many abatements did you say, 25?
25 to
So
date.
far this year?
Yep.
Okay.
And then the last part is sign code enforcement, which is part of code enforcement and has a separate budget. Just gives you an idea of the amount of signs that we regulate. Of course, Lamar Advertising being the biggest user of that service, but I didn't add them up. Looks like about 200 different signs that we inspect and maintain.
Now, do they get called for, oh, excuse me, Ron's, for the brightness of the LCD signs also?
We've had some calls on that. And I don't see Andy over here yet. He was going to come over at 4. And I'm not sure I could ask Jason. I'm not sure who actually regulates the brightness on the sign. I don't know the answer to that.
I think it was Brad. So,
Oh,
but I just thought that might be part of it. But I do have another person who's got light on.
okay.
I recognize Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure I understood that these graphs, first of all, I appreciate that you put year-to-date. I haven't seen anybody yet present their budget with year-to-date, which is very helpful to us.
Thank you.
With these are, like, say, on grass weeds, that number 587 going back to 2008, that's just the initial inspection, and whatever happened after that didn't go into that number, is that correct?
That's correct. Like on one inspection, you may have, it's like one violation, if you will. You may go out there once, you may go out there 10 times, but it just counts as one in our stats.
Okay. And then I'd go to this sign one I didn't quite understand, because you actually have companies' names on here. Lamar Advertising and non-Lamar Advertising. I don't understand that part of it, I guess.
If I may, it's just the way Andy broke it out because they're the biggest user of our service. He just wanted to show how much work he did with one vendor, if you will, and just chose to break it out that way. No particular significance to it.
Because on the top it says enforce the municipal sign code as it pertains to, are they just asking you to come out and see if they're in compliance or something, or?
Right. There's ordinances dealing with how the signs are regulated in the city, and if there's a violation or a complaint, the sign code enforcement. Actually, the code enforcement can do it, but Andy has a primary duty for the code enforcement of the signs, and he'll go out and do the inspection.
Okay. On this number, 2008, 2009, it says Lamar Advertising 127. They had 127 complaints?
Mr. President, if I may.
That's-
No, that's how many signs we regulate. That's the number of signs we regulate.
Oh,
oh,
all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I'll follow up later.
I think no, I got questions. So, that's how many signs Lamar's got in town that they keep an eye on, and non-Lamar, that's how many they have. So that's how many signs that they actually have in town, right?
This is how many signs sign code enforcement oversees during the course
Okay.
of the year.
Okay.
Guess I should have made that clearer, but yeah.
Because I was thinking that it might be some of the temporary signs that people put up, like during the rally and that type of thing. That might throw into some other ones too, but, okay, thanks, Kevin.
And then just, I guess my last couple closing comments, I mean, you have the budget numbers, and I wasn't going to run through them unless there's any particular questions. The only major change from last year was we took community resources and rolled it under HR, so those are now combined as in one section. And then again, just a reminder, I said it earlier, but the GIS, we get $100,000 from the county because it's a joint city-county venture. So with that, I guess it's available for questions.
I recognize Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions. One is, Kevin, do you believe that code enforcement fits well under your department, or do you feel that as a law enforcement function, perhaps it might be more well-suited to the police department?
Mr. President, I think it fits fine. We've had a lot of discussions about, should it be under police, should it be under community resources, at one time it was under growth management, at one time it was under the city attorney. We seem to be getting our sea legs at this point, and it seems to be gelling and working, but if somebody has a better suggestion for a better plan, I'm open to suggestions.
So as a follow-up to that, the council a few years ago had put in a policy of either 2 hours or 4 hours of proactive enforcement per week. Do you think that ties your hands from being, does that tie your hands and cause confusion?
Well, being new to the process, if I can speak candidly, I guess I found it unusual that the city council regulated that low a level of activity by any city employees. I guess I don't know of any other city employees that are regulated in that fashion, so it struck me as a little unusual that they passed a resolution to regulate their activity and to put a cap on 20% proactive. I think it hamstrings us.
And I think it would be more efficient in terms of the budget and in terms of the overall operation as well if that restriction was removed to allow more discretion. In addition, I have another question, and this is related to IT. So, Kevin, there's a lot of organizations that have started using products like Microsoft Live Communication Server and similar products that are internal to the network that are logged. And they're very similar to, for example, AOL Instant Messenger or something like that, but it doesn't have the potential for viruses and other things like the external instant messaging programs do, and it's really helped in organizations internally in terms of communication, and it seems that would really help with having 750 employees, allowing for increased communication, and that it could be logged. I don't know how much licensing would cost, but is that something that you have looked into for the city?
We haven't looked at it in any great detail. When our IT officer gets there, I can ask them if they've done any research as of late. If I understand it right, it's like an internal instant messaging system.
Internal.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm not advocating that it be used at meetings. It would only be for internal messaging between departments and between city employees, and I think it would really facilitate and improve communication. Sounds like the library uses something similar to it over there, but I think it's something that would be, you can set up groups, so you can communicate to whole groups at a time, and it's really increased efficiency at the organizations that I'm familiar with that are using it. It's also expensive. I don't know how expensive it is, but I think it's worth looking into, and if you could ask about that.
Mr. President, if I may, we'll do some investigation and follow up with you.
Any follow-up, Sam? Okay. Next, I'll recognize Alderwoman Karen Olson. You're next. You had your light on. I'll recognize Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
We are actually in the process of looking into code enforcement ordinances and changing some of those processes. So just to give council a heads up, there's a few of us, Alderman Costello, this was his suggestion to look at different ordinances and how we could do code enforcement better, and then I joined the committee. So I thought that was very positive for him to bring that up, and then Kevin had accommodated us in a sense to form somewhat of a committee to look at these things. So just to keep you informed, and that we are looking into some of the processes in the ordinance that we have in code enforcement.
Thank you, Ms. Haggard. I'll make one quick comment, Kevin. When I first got on the council, I was on the task force with code enforcement. The reason that number got to where it was I think we also included that code enforcement attend. I think it was one community meeting per quarter or something along those lines. And then we were assured that with every violation that was looked into, that, you know, 2 or 3 in the surrounding area were also looked at too at that point in time. And I think that's where that number probably came up at.
Okay.
But I just wanted to make those comments for you.
If I could just expound on Councilperson Hadcock's reference to our meeting. You know, both this mayor and council have been very supportive of code enforcement. We appreciate that and the role that it plays in keeping the community, you know, cleaned up. And we met with councilpersons Hadcock and Costello a couple weeks ago, I guess it was, and we're going to do a follow-up meeting we're going to try for this week. It'll probably be next week. But a couple of things that we had started working on with the city attorney's office is, one is a citation process where we have the ability to actually go out and just issue a citation, as opposed to going through this. We get a complaint, we go out and look at the tall grass, send you a notice, you got 10 days, and then, I mean, it takes a month or 6 weeks to get somebody to cut their grass. And we have, in fact, I have a draft of a citation that our city attorney is going to be meeting with the presiding judge, Judge Davis, to talk about. It's not approved yet, but it has to go through the presiding judge. And then it can actually be written by the police department, not the code enforcement, by the police department. So if code enforcement goes out, or the police on their own identify 15 code violations and go out and, you know, issue citations for anything that falls under the nuisance, whether it's vehicles, grass, snow, et cetera. So we're going to have another tool in addition to the abatement process. We're going to have a tool where we can issue citations. And the other thing we've been looking at is, can we also hold the occupant of the property accountable and not just the property owner? So you can actually issue a citation to who's ever living at the residence or renting the residence. You know, we have a lot of absentee landlords that live out of state or out of town, or we have some landlords that want us to be their property management and go in and do the cleanup all the time, and that's not really our function. So if we can go in and write a ticket to the occupant, a ticket to the owner, and then even start the abatement process all at the same time, we feel we can get quicker compliance. If a police officer shows up every day and is going to write you a ticket for whatever the ticket's going to cost, you'll probably get your grass cut. And understand, from a code enforcement philosophy, the goal is to, you know, get compliance at the curbside. I think the code enforcement officers do a very good job of going out and trying to cajole people into doing what they're supposed to do and are not heavy-handed. You know, compliance is the goal, and if they'll cut their grass by going out and talking to them, then that's a solution. So this will give us one more tool. And the other thing we will be bringing forward, again, as we meet with some of the council people and bring it forward, there are some ordinance changes. Some of it's cleanup, some of it will streamline the process in terms of the notification. Instead of 10 days, maybe the second notice will be 3 days as far as the abatement's concerned. So there are some things in the works, and we appreciate your support on it.
Thank you, Kevin. I will say thank you to Alderman Deb Hadcock and Alderman Costello for taking the initiative to sit down and go through some of that stuff. I do want to give you guys kudos for some of the work that you guys, code enforcement does do. I mean, they work together not only with the police department, but the fire department, and it's all it's all started to work together. I know there's been a few projects here in town where it takes coordination between all three to get the jobs done, and they've managed to get a good working relationship, and so we appreciate what they do with that.
Thank you.
I'll recognize Alderman, Vice President Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kevin, just looking at the actual numbers, the under line item 4225 other professional services is $10,000 more. Just curious as to what will it be used for?
Let me get to that section. Are you in the overall budget, or are you in one of the?
General fund.
101. The total
I'd have to go through the individual budgets and see where the actual increase came from. Just look here.
And Kevin, if you don't have it now, maybe if we could ask that question, we can get that answer back.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chapman. Do you have anything else, Kevin?
Nope. Here to answer any questions.
Do we have any further questions from the council or comments? I'd just like to make a comment that I think you guys are doing a good job, and I know I appreciate all the work Barbara Garcia does for the task force, Strengthening Families Task Force, and in the community. I've seen her in a lot of the meetings, and you too, Kevin. I mean, I've seen you a lot of the public meetings, North Rapid and others, and the citywide meetings, trying to gain information and give information to the community, and it's well appreciated.
Thank you.
I will recognize Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. One more time, Kevin, this was discussed a while back, but the video streaming, where did we end up with that?
If I may, Mr. President.
Oh, Kevin.
Today at Legal and Finance, we brought forward a request to redo the RFP process. We had went through the process, selected a vendor, worked with them for many months, eventually come to the point where we just abandoned that last week and going to start the RFP process over. I think it's on the consent calendar for Monday night. And as we mentioned at Legal and Finance, we'll ask council leadership to appoint somebody from the council to sit through the RFPs with us. We need to do the upgrades in here first, and then Granicus is a company that provides video audio streaming. Frankly, I'm disappointed that it isn't in place now and working, but like I told Legal and Finance, I just didn't want something in front of you every time you met not working, and thinking bad thoughts about IT and why it isn't working. So chose to. I thought we had the deal in hand. That's why I went to CIP and asked for reprogramming the funding. That's how certain we were that the deal was secure. And last week the numbers moved again on us, and the installation date moved again, and I just said, okay, that's enough, so we'll start over. And frankly, we've had good luck with already interest from other vendors. Last time we only had 2, so the pickings were kind of thin. That's why I was so patient with this last vendor. We've already found a better way to get the RFPs out and advertised. So the short answer to your question is it'll probably be a few more months before we get it in place.
And as a follow-up to that, Kevin, I know that there's been some concern about the expense of also adding in voting buttons, but I think that if it could be displayed on the screen how people vote, that would be a real assistance to people who are hard of hearing. Years ago, we looked at closed captioning or a signing, and it was very expensive. So perhaps that's an option that could be at least looked at as an alternate in the RFP to see what it would take to put in voting buttons that would then integrate into the video stream and the item number.
So, Mr. President.
Recognize Kevin.
And again, we had some of this discussion at Legal and Finance today, but we did explore that as an option last time, and because it was my feeling that the council wasn't interested in using that option or exploring that option. It was a few $1,000s more to add it. It wasn't terribly expensive, but I guess that would take a policy call from the council to decide if you want to incorporate that feature or not incorporate it. So I'd look to you all for direction at that point.
We can discuss it more Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I see no other lights. Do you have any recap, Kevin?
No?
Appreciate what you guys do.
Thank you.
Oh, now I have.
Nope, it's not for them. it's
Okay.
for us.
Yeah. I'll recognize Vice President Malcolm Chapman.
I think this is the end of our agenda. I asked Jason to call the Humane Society and have them come over early. I'm not sure, I heard something about local governments, if they're supposed to come as well.
I'll recognize Jason Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. I asked Kay to contact Humane Society. She made several phone calls and was informed they're aware they were supposed to be here and they're on their way.
They're here.
Does anybody, next question is Black Hills local government. I don't have that on my agenda. Was never notified of it. I'll recognize Jim Preston.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Sumption did get a hold of them. Blaze will be over here at 4:30.
Okay.
So we're going to try to, again, if you want to let these guys catch your breath here a little bit, we can
No.
go over through some of these items. If you want to just
Yeah.
pressure
Go ahead and
on.
let them regroup, and we'll take, since there's going to be 4:30, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break and come back. That'll give them time to...
Let them get set up here.
Okay. Go
The
ahead,
other
Jim.
thing I'd like to tell you, unbeknown to me, any handouts, I guess we were supposed to punch holes in them and have books for it, so we may want to collect those things back from you and get the holes punched in them and get them
Yeah.
put in the books,
Yes,
so.
okay.
so
That's
we
my
may-
fault. I should have told you that.
We may want
It's been
do that
It's been moved and second, take a 10-minute break. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, motion carried. come back into session.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to resume. Any further discussions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a few things left, and then I think the rest will be up to you, whatever your guidance is, you and the council. We have the Humane Society here. We want to make a presentation to you. They told me it'd be a short presentation, so I guess it'd be up to you to hold them to that. And then Blaze Emerson will be here at 4:30 from Black Hills Council Local Government. And it's for a little bit, I'd like to have Ms. Sumption come up here beside me once we get done with these other two, and we'll explain these handouts. And my understanding, you have a book there. My understanding is that you didn't want loose papers out there, so the mayor's office did prepare these binders, and there is a 3-hole punch in the council caucus room that you can use to punch holes in that and place them in the binders. And very nice binders. They got dividers and stuff. And it certainly is recyclable, or Mr. Costello. So. Okay,
Yeah.
That's all I have, sir.
Yes, I'll just touch on that, because we've gotten some handouts all through the last 3 days. And so that's what the books are for. So when we go into the breakout sessions, we'll have that information. If any other council member has something that they want to bring to the breakout sessions, please bring copies for everybody so they can place them in their books for review during the breakouts. Okay, well, I guess we're ready, Jim.
Okay, for Humane Society, I do appreciate them rushing in here earlier, so maybe we can get out here a little bit earlier. But Katie Stolik, is that right? Oh, okay. Thank you.
First off, I want to thank you for allowing us to come to speak with you today. I know that you have a tremendous task ahead of you, so we won't take up too much of your time. We have collected some information for you to review tonight. Kent is handing that out. Kent is our Senior Animal Control Officer, and with me I also have Josh Curtis, who is our Shelter Manager. And
Sorry, Katie.
I'm going to wait for everyone to get them before I start going over. Pages 1 and 2, since we couldn't bring any animals in to visit you, we put some kennel cards in of a cat and a dog that have currently been or recently been at the shelter. It shares their plight and how the money given to us by the city helps the defenseless animals of our city. Each council member has a different cat or dog. Many of them are available for adoption, so if you need a cat or a dog, there's some suggestions in there for you. Page 3 gives information on all of our current board members. And what I'd like to start with is some of the changes that we have made in order to be good stewards of the money we receive from not only the city, but the county and individual donors as well. You have a sheet in your packet, which is page 4, discussing several changes. I will only discuss the changes that have financial implications. First off, we now have strict procedures on the financials, bookkeeping, donations, and we do no longer have petty cash available. We have a part-time bookkeeper that does all of the data entry. We have another bookkeeper that comes in once a month that reconciles the bank statements so that not one person is entering all the data and then reconciling the bank statements. And the board reviews monthly financial statements. The president and treasurer work closely with both bookkeepers, and we go in and take random backups of the QuickBooks so we can take that home and look at that. We have a budget implemented for 2010, which is also in your packet. We have no Humane Society employees on bank accounts. There is in the notes, our bookkeeper is in the notes of our bank so that she can call and ask questions, but she has no access to the money. She has no access to transfer money or to pull money out of our bank accounts. Only the executive committee is on our bank accounts, and it takes 2 signatures to sign checks. We require a purchase order for every purchase made through the Humane Society. One of the cost savings that we've implemented is that we've downgraded from an executive director to a shelter manager, who is Josh here with us. We've worked with a consultant to streamline our operation. One of our management positions was cut through attrition. We are going to be, as of August 15th, open only 5 days a week instead of 6. We're going to be open Wednesday through Sunday. We've never been open Sunday before, so we're hoping that that will allow the community better access to our facility to be open all weekend. We estimate that that'll probably save us around $5,000 a month by doing that. We have hired a part-time professional veterinarian to provide better care for the animals. This has cut our vet costs in half from previous years. The board has gone through every monthly expense, and if we have needed to switch companies to get a different percentage rate, recently we switched our credit card processing company. That's going to save us about $600 a year. We've estimated by doing all of the changes of our monthly expenses, we're going to save about $5,000 a year doing that as well. The board has also actively been seeking donated services for the shelter. Currently, Rapid City Laundry has been gracious enough to do our laundry for us 5 days a week. And we also have a Cut Above Lawn service that is doing our lawn care for us donated. So that has cut a large amount from our expenses as well. And the board, like I said, the board is actively seeking donations of that kind. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Not so far. Okay.
Pages 5 through 8 show how much the city has grown over the years. One of the issues that we are experiencing is the annexed areas of Rapid City. Once the area is annexed, we no longer receive the fee that we would have received from the county for animals picked up there. But because we've gained territory, we've lost the revenue, as well as the growth of Rapid City. There is a list in there of new subdivisions that we also the Humane Society is in charge of those. There's also, I believe it was 9,038 people increased in Rapid City over the past 5 years. Page 9 shows the animal control calls and how many animals we have taken in since 2005. Even though the Humane Society spays or neuters everything that leaves our facility, the numbers continue to grow. It scares me to think about the numbers we would have if we did not spay and neuter everything that leaves our facility. Pages 10 through 12 shows our projected budget for 2010. We did an analysis of the past 5 years and our spending to put this budget together. We think it's pretty on target for what we have been spending, and as you can see, there is a significant shortfall in our budget. The changes that I discussed earlier are reflected in this budget, but as you can see, we do have a significant shortfall for 2010 projected numbers. And finally, you will see our proposed contract with the city for the next 5 years. We realize that you are under budget constraints as well, so the board got together and brainstormed ways that we could ask the city to help us balance our budget without a percentage increase for 2010. And some of the ideas that we came up with, number one is the city take over our dispatch for animal control. Currently, we pay an individual to be an animal control dispatch Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. We feel this is a duplication of services, as many of the public call the police department or sheriff's office anyways. It's not unusual for the police department to get 4 to 5 calls a day for animal control in the summer months. This would save the Humane Society around $18,000 a year in wages and employee taxes. Number 2 would be to allow the Humane Society use of the city mechanics. We would be willing to pay for the parts, but if we could get use of the shop facility so we did not have to pay labor, that would help us as well. We have 2 animal control vehicles that are running nonstop. They need to be serviced quite a lot, and Kent could speak to that later if you have more questions. Also, another idea we had would be to allow the Humane Society to collect fees on the tickets written by our animal control. And number 4, if the city would not charge the Humane Society for water usage. So that's the end of what I have to say. Is there any other questions?
We're lighting up. I'll recognize Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that probably some questions are going to allude to more questions, or obviously you have a shortfall of $120,000, and you come up with some what I think are creative ideas to maybe make up for that shortfall. And it looks like you guys have went through and cut and changed things and synergized things is about as close as you can get. It's unfortunate that pet owners in our community don't take better control. I wish I could take all them pet owners and put them in them little cages and euthanize a few of them if they failed to get treated the same way that the animals get treated by such a, it's beyond me, but that's beside the point, and it is a necessity that you guys operate and function within our community. You had mentioned earlier that the annexing part of the county would drop some of your revenue. What is that number?
Okay, Ron. Basically, the areas that get annexed currently, or before that, were covered under our county contract. Basically, how the contract was designed, yes, it was 2 contracts, but it was a 70% city, 30% county paid to the Humane Society. Okay, the county has dropped that due to the fact of biggest share of the animals, and they're on a by animal, by call basis with us now. On the basis that they've went through, we're collecting probably 10% from them of what we used to collect. And they do pay for each individual animal. They do pay for each call that they send us on. The problem we have is in those areas, primarily like the donut hole, was one of the biggest areas where animals from the county come from. It is one of, I have 2 major areas that I have problems with animal control wise, and the donut hole was one of them before, and it will be again, now that we have it back. The problem we have here is that the county opted out of the contract due to the fact of the loss of what they have. So we're still collecting about 10% from them. We're still collecting the 70% from you guys. But that leaves it at 20% donut hole basically in our budget that we no longer collect.
Okay. I see that you have Box Elder on here and they're paying you, I think, income of like $6,000.
That is correct.
And so the
That's
county,
It will be significantly higher in the 2010 contract.
okay, it will be, okay, just because of numbers of.
The numbers
animals.
and the way that contract was negotiated on our part was part of the problem that we've had with executive directors. One of our directors actually negotiated that contract, and he gave away the farm.
Well,
And
that's
it
what I was
actually
wondering
cost us
about.
money
Okay.
for some of the stuff that was in that contract, and that contract comes up at the end of the year as well.
And then you talked about a dispatch. You have a full-time dispatcher that you pay?
We
Yes, we
do.
do.
And that's about $18,000 a year.
Yes.
And then you said use of city mechanics and shop facilities. Were you actually using the mechanic, or were you just using the facilities?
Well, basically, what we're asking for here, Ron, is we will pay for all parts and take our vehicle, like for an oil change, I'll come with oil and filters and all that and bring it over there and have them do it for us.
Then you'd mentioned collecting fees for, you guys write tickets for,
Yes, we do.
and then what happens to them fees?
Currently, it goes through the court system just like normal. And the other thing, of course, is if I write a ticket in the city, 10% of those funds goes to the police department's training fund. Or a percentage anyway, I think it's 2% actually, not 10, excuse me. Goes to their training fund. But if I write a ticket, it still goes to their training fund. We get nothing out of them.
What happens to the other 98%?
I have no idea. Jason may be able to answer that better than I can.
Mr. Chair, I'll pose that question to Mr. Green.
Mr. Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe $51 of all city citations includes liquidated costs, a portion of which goes into the law enforcement training fund maintained by the Attorney General's office and the court system. Any portion of the fine, though, some of that goes to the school district and a small portion comes back to the city. But let me just cut this one off right now. I think it would be illegal for the city to agree to give a portion of the fines to the entity that's writing tickets for us. I don't think that passes constitutional muster.
Thank you, Jason.
That isn't where I was going. I was just saying, I think, in the long term, where I would go is if they're out there doing the enforcement, there's got to be a mechanism for a cost recovery system for them. But that was a whole different ballgame. And then, how much water does you guys get charged for by the city?
Currently, we're at about $4,000 in June, so I doubled it for this, so we're running about 8,000, and historically, that's been the number that we've been spending a year, is 8,000, around 8,000 a year.
Okay, I'm just gonna yield to the rest of my colleagues, because I'm sure they'll have more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitebuck. I will say, this is a sensitive subject, and I felt one of the comments was inappropriate about the euthanizing, and so we need to kind of be careful how we address this subject. Next, we have Patty Martinson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I am the part of the Humane Society Board. I'm glad of that. And I did tour the facility. I am impressed with how it is well run. So I'm very confident in the future of the Humane Society. And I just have a question. I just want to be clear that you lost money through the county, but you have more territory now through the city, but no increased revenue due to the increased services to the city area. Is that correct?
The way the contract was written is that there's roughly a 3% gain each year from the city contract, but that has not been enough to cover the costs of the amount of territory that we've gained through either economic growth or annexation of areas of Rapid City.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ms. Martinson. Next, we have Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Just a question, I had it, but, is management salaries, how many managers do you have for $187,540?
We have Josh as a shelter manager. Our veterinarian is also under there. We have a kennel supervisor, and we also have Misha's title. Misha, the exam technician, is also on there. So there's 4. And also we have another supervisor in there as well. So actually there's 5.
So there's 5 people under him. And the 80,000 is for animal control officers?
Yes.
Okay, because I was trying to figure out what AC. Figured it out. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Hadcock. Next, I'll recognize Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. It sounds like the county has ended their contract.
No, they have not ended it.
They have not?
No. The way that the county works is it's individual fees. If, for instance, a dog is brought in by the county, there's an initial fee, and then it depends on how long the dog is there. So they are billed per animal, and that contract has not come to an end yet.
And when does that contract end?
Also January 1st. Right now, everything that we have for contracts ends January 1 because it's designed that way on purpose at this point, because without a city contract, which is our major contract, them other ones I'm not going to handle. If I don't have a city contract, I'm not going to do a contract with the other ones because it's just not going to be feasible.
It means you'd close the shelter. And would the building then revert back to the city?
The building actually never was the city's. The land was, but the building was built in 1998. We got the land before that.
The city gave you the
Right.
land.
The city gave us the land.
So then would the land be given back?
Right now, it's under the Humane Society. I'm not sure what would happen with the land if that were to happen.
Okay. So is it an option then? I guess I would like to see what the county pays in terms of, what it costs per service call versus, for their contract versus how we do our contract, to see, how we could structure our, our contract as well. Is that information that could be provided to us?
Mm-hmm.
It could be, and I can tell you right now, Sam, that it would be a lot higher than what you pay.
Okay.
A lot higher.
So the county on it, the county, we actually get a better deal than on our contract when you compare it to the
Yes.
to the county.
Yeah,
So-
by individual, I'll give you a quick example. Animal control call is $35 an hour minimum during business hours. After hours is $45 per hour. 45 cents a mile for every mile we go to and from. That's portal to portal. And then animal intake wise, $40 for the first day, $20 the additional 2 days we have to hold them for stray. And then medical expenses is expense plus 20%. And euthanasia it runs $35 an animal.
Okay. So it sounds like the executive committee is signing off on all of the checks. There's several people that sign it. So it sounds like the executive committee is performing direct management functions. Is the executive committee and all the board members, are they all unpaid volunteers?
Yes.
Okay. So how much was saved then by adjusting the salaries and the position from having a director to a shelter manager?
It's about a $20,000 cost savings a year.
Okay. So I'll just ask, it's publicly funded, so I think it's a safe question. What was the director being paid and what is the manager being paid?
The directors over the past couple of years have been paid anywhere from $75,000 to $35,000. The last director was paid $35,000. If we were to hire another director, they would probably be paid $50,000 because that's pretty much the standard in Rapid City.
And the shelter manager is making
$28,000.
Okay. So you said the range was $35,000 to $75,000?
There was a director that was paid $75,000. We would not do that again.
Which director was paid $75,000?
That was Mr. Olson.
Okay. So, the shelter depends heavily on donations from the community. I know there's donors that have stated publicly in the Rapid City Journal and other places that they have concerns with how the shelters has been run in the past. It seems like you've made an effort to assist with that. I think that the lack of dialogue a year or so ago cost you dearly, cost the shelter dearly. And one of the questions that I have is I'm unable to find the story, but my recollection is that the specific amount of what was missing was not released. Do you have that amount? And can you please release that?
Yes, the amount for both of them was around $20,000. We did receive $10,000 from Ms. Berger as a lump sum. Obviously, we could not receive anything from Mr. Mayberry.
We also got part of the stuff, the actual physical items that were missing back.
So you recovered about 50% of the
Right.
of the approximate $20,000.
Right. We will also we have employee dishonesty insurance up to $10,000, which we are filing a claim. It has a $500 deductible, so we will be hopefully receiving $9,500 to cover what Mr. Mayberry took.
Now the adjustment of hours from, was it Monday through Saturday to Wednesday to?
Wednesday to Sunday.
Okay.
Yes.
What kind of communication was done on that with the public to announce that change of being closed on Mondays and Tuesdays?
It was about a month ago. We faxed out press releases, and it's been posted at the Humane Society for a couple of weeks. And with the City Council, we actually sent it out in our last board pack, the hours change. So we realize that it's going to be different for the public, but we also believe that being open on Sunday will benefit the public. A lot of people come in on Saturday and find an animal, but of course they want to think about it. Then they can't come back until Monday. This way, if they slept on it, they could come back Sunday. Monday and Tuesday are historically slow days for us anyways. This will allow us to run on a skeleton crew of just cleaning staff to take care of the animals. So therefore we were able to, through attrition, we've been able to cut some of the positions. We used to have 4 front desk staff and we're going down to 3. We're actually going down to 2 because we're only going to be open 5 days a week. So there's going to be a significant cost savings to us, and hopefully the public will understand why we're doing it.
And your board, how long are the term?
3 years.
The terms are 3 years.
3-year terms.
And the city has several appointments now.
5. Yep.
5.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 12 members total.
There's 15.
15.
Total.
And the remaining members are appointed from within?
There's a total of 15?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quaker. Next, we have a question from Karen Gunderson Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An organization like the Humane Society, I noticed that, I mean, you have approximately $140,000 in donations. And, I mean, I just think it's something for the council to think about when we talk about this issue of salaries. Without some, I mean, there is some necessity for some kind of development in an organization like this to raise $140,000. It doesn't just fall out of the sky. I know I've worked for nonprofit organizations, and that's often the director's, that's part of the director's responsibility, or that salary really takes into consideration. And as that salary gets lower, it would seem to me you lose the possibility of hiring someone who has the kind of contacts and the skill sets to raise money. So I just want my colleagues to understand that as you think about that. So in addition, as those salaries decrease, and I'm not recommending, I'm not going to tell you at all what the salary should be, but that is a consideration because the potential for additional loss on the funding side exists as you lose the capability of hiring people that are able to do that kind of work in the community. So just make that observation.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Katie, I do have two questions, I guess. You know, the county went to a different billing method with you, and once they did that, their actual contributions went down.
Right.
And so they're actually paying less than what they used to. How much was that?
I think they're paying about 10% of what they were paying previously.
Okay.
So they were, is that $10,000?
And the
Oh, no,
next
10,000.
next question I have is, I received a concern on phone calls that somebody tried calling the Humane Society and the phone was disconnected or something like that.
I got a call from somebody yesterday on that, and as soon as I got done talking to that person, I dialed it myself because they kept telling me it was disconnected. I got our normal message that was on there.
And you got a message that gives the normal
Our normal business hours and all that stuff.
at
Yes.
all hours of the day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, I don't know where they come up with it was disconnected unless they dialed something wrong. Because like I said, when I got off the phone, someone gave them my cell phone number, they called me on my cell. I talked to the person, found out what they wanted, and then I turned around after I got off the phone and I tried calling our number right back. And it did the usual message that's always on our phone.
Okay.
So I don't know where the disconnection part come from. Let me explain just a little bit more. You was asking about the county thing. The county has opted to do most of the animal control themselves. It'd be very much like as if you guys taxed the police department even further and had them do the animal control themselves. And then when they get into a bind because they do not have any equipment, they do not have any training, so they do the best they can with what they got to work with, and then when they get knee-deep in trouble, then they call me. Or call our office, actually. But as a result, that's where the 20% come from. And the other thing, of course, is some of the areas that most of the county animals come from is now city.
Okay. I guess for my recap, is what you were asking for was a break from the city water fees, which is about $8,000 a year, because you're going to be short $119,470,000 for the fiscal year 2010 is what you're going to be short.
Right.
And you really have no fundraising efforts to.
We do.
Do you have something in plan to try
Yeah,
and
we
raise
have
that
a
money?
very active fundraising committee. We meet almost weekly. We have several events lined up almost every month. We've been lining up PR events. We'll be at the States Fair. We'll be at the home show.
Okay.
So yeah, we do have a very active core group of about 10 people that are meeting almost weekly. We realize we have to close that gap. So.
Okay. That's good to know, Katie. Thanks. We do have some more lines. I'll recognize Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Understanding, Katie, that it says right in here that you have $140,000 budgeted for fundraising. So how much did you fundraise the previous year?
Let me get my paperwork.
I'm assuming these numbers aren't recognized at all yet, right? This is your 210 budget?
Right.
So $146,000 is what you plan on fundraising.
Correct.
Got my trusty binder. This year, so far January 1 through July 21st, we have raised total of the fundraisers of $189,902, but that, a majority of that, $139,520 was bequests. So we obviously can't count on that for our 2010 budget.
Correct, okay. I appreciate that. So the
Yep.
difference would be what you've actually fundraised off of the sides of the bequest. okay.
Right.
Even if the city came to your need here at $18,000 and $8,000, that's like $26,000, you're still gonna be substantially short. What else, I'm understanding cutting salaries and things like that are gonna only go so far.
Right.
For someone running your shelter to make $28,000 a year, I understand Ms. Olson's comments in there, and that's a tough gig right there.
Right.
And understanding you're coming off of some areas of problem, but it's a necessity, as I mentioned earlier. It's an unfortunate necessity. I'm just trying to think of. I'm not sure what else. What other plans do you guys have?
We have quite a few board members that are actively writing grants. We can write grants for spay-neuter. We can write grants for capital improvement. We haven't run across any for just operations of the Humane Society, but if we're writing grants as fast as possible, to be quite honest with you. That's not anything that is in that budget either. That's not anything that we can necessarily count on. But hopefully that will make up the shortfall with being able to use. Right now we spend, and this is a fairly old number, I haven't had a chance to do an analysis, but right now we spend about $6,000 a month doing spay-neuters, and there are a lot of grants out there that we can get that will help defray the costs of that.
When they do a spay-neuter, Katie, does that pet usually adopt it out?
Yes.
Okay, so they're not
They're
going to
not-
euthanize that
No.
same pet that they.
Animals are not spayed or neutered until they're adopted.
Okay, and that's something that's in this budget. Okay, have you guys received grants in the past?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So when's the last time you?
Josh actually wrote 2 grants that we received a couple of months ago.
Okay.
So, but again, over the past couple of years, there hasn't been anybody actively writing grants.
Okay, that's the question I was alluding to see
Right.
how some of this has come to the point where you're at today.
Right.
I appreciate it. There's a huge understanding here for us to undertake, but it's obvious I don't think the city wants to take this over in any means. It's a tough job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weichenbach. Next, we have, I'll recognize Karen Gunderson Olson.
Certainly looks, Katie, I mean, based on what your fundraising estimates for next year, and I assume that's based on some history.
Right.
And I'm glad that you have a committee that's actively working, and I don't know how that's been in the past, how much of those monies that you raise from fundraisers have occurred through your volunteer efforts or versus your paid staff efforts.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a pretty good track record.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Next, I'll recognize Alderman Ron Kroger. Yeah.
Katie, first of all, I want to say I don't really want the city to take us over, but I do have a couple questions.
Sure.
And like so far for this year for your budget, you guys basically got to be pretty much in the hole effective now, aren't you?
We just received another bequest, so we are, as of last month, we are positive. Let's see here. $41,600.
So you'll basically pretty much be able to make it through the end of the year.
Mhm.
I guess my biggest concern, and I don't know how you can answer this, but you know, even if we were to be able to do the things that you asked, you know, you're still basically $100,000 short.
Right.
What happens if it stays that way? I mean, what if there's no bequests, or there's, you know, no additional donations, or what happens to you guys at the end of next year and your $100,000?
There's a lot
in
of
the hole?
things that in the past have gone by the wayside that the board has re-implemented that we don't have the information to give to you. We used to have membership where there was membership fees, and that was done away with a few directors ago. We're re-implementing membership. Like I said, there hasn't been anybody actively writing grants over the past couple of years. So I think just the board stepping up to the plate and doing the fundraising and doing a lot of the things that need to get done is going to help significantly. I think also the public has always been behind us. We have had obviously turmoil over the past year or so, but whenever we ask for something, the public is always there helping us out. A lot of the things too that we've been counting on is we haven't been asking for money, we've been asking for things. Dog food, cat litter, blankets, those types of things. That's all stuff that we don't have to pay for. And we have an event coming up with Walmart. We're going to be doing a Stuff the Truck event, asking people to go in and buy bleach, laundry detergent, office supplies, anything that we don't have to pay for. And I know $100,000 is a big gap to fill, but I have all the confidence. Hopefully I'm not eating my words. All the confidence in the world that we can achieve that.
I just want to end by saying that, you know, you guys definitely have a daunting task, and your board needs to be commended, and actually the employees and staff need to be commended too,
Right.
because you do have a big challenge, and you know, I don't really know how you get through it, but I do know that I, as an individual on the council, do not want the city to take over it, so I'm certainly supportive, trying to help you in any way I can. Thank
One
you.
other thing, Ron, like Katie said, she has every confidence that we can do this, and I know we can too. I've been at this for 8.5 years now. I've seen times when it was a race to the bank to see if our checks would clear or not when we got them, back when I first started. And I haven't had that problem in the last few years. So the board has turned things around to where I think that we are not going to have that problem, and I have full confidence in the board, and if nothing else, we're going to have to be more creative.
I do have another light. I'll recognize Alderman Ron Leifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too wanted to share in some of Alderman Kroger's comments in the fact that it's a daunting task. You guys have come a long ways presenting this budget and being prepared and showing us where you're at now and today and where you've come with a lot of volunteers. I mean, you've got a very skeleton crew there. You've got a daunting task. It's very, you know, there's a lot of fine lines you walk, and I'm sure that at some point, you know, to pull through will be the ultimate goal. But it's I think the council is going to have to have a very long conversation about what our role will be moving forward in the city. Obviously, it sounds like you have a lot of checks and balances in place now, where in some areas they weren't there, and you know, as far as the internal controls that you have in place. So, and I appreciate Katie, appreciate your employees, what you guys have done, what your board has done to get it to this point, because it's a job that has to be done. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leifenbach. Next, I'll recognize Vice President Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a question. I heard that one of the requests of the city is to I think waive the water fee. Is it a possibility that one time you take out that which needs watering and then you do some sort of creative rock gardens, or you do xeriscape, or you do something that wouldn't require water.
If you see our
Just a thought.
landscaping, it's not being used outside. The water is, every day, the procedure of cleaning the kennels. We have to clean, obviously, all of the walls, all of the floors, everything in the entire building. So that's where I'd say 95% of our water goes, is cleaning the inside of the building, and that's done daily, so.
Thank you.
Well, you know, as I said at the beginning, this is a sensitive subject, and it's like they said, you have a daunting task in front of you, and this council has a big task in front of them also with a request of over $1 million of unfunded things that are coming forward. So, you know, as we work through the budget process, I can guarantee you the council people are going to keep you in their mind, but remember, there's no guarantees with anything. So we appreciate your time and your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Emerson. Mr. Preston?
Next, we have Black Hills Local Government with Blaze.
Well, good evening. Blaze Emerson, Executive Director for Black Hills Council of Local Governments. We're here again asking for our annual assessment. This year, we have been in the council approved 5 years ago, or 5 years ago, was a rate assessment of an increase of a little over 4% a year for a 5-year time period. This year, the management committee looked at the economic situation around the region, and hopefully maybe I don't know if Jim put it in the packet or not, we did send out a letter of, I think, June 15th that basically said we're not asking for any increase from last year's assessment. So it would be the same as last year's assessment that we're asking for. This year's assessment is the same for next year's. This year's been kind of a unique year for the council. With the stimulus package that came out, it kind of threw a curveball to our work plan. We've assisted a number of communities out there with different unexpected applications particularly for water and sewer projects. The city of Rapid City chose not to look for some of the stimulus funding particularly for the water treatment plant because of some of the stipulations that were included in that, with the main one being the Buy American, and then with the wastewater treatment, or not the wastewater, but the water treatment plant, the filters that were selected would not meet that category of a Buy American. But we did assist with an SRF application for the water treatment plant. There is a SRF application that's going in front of the Board of Water and Natural Resources for the wastewater treatment plant, and also there was a consolidated funding application that helped with the water treatment plant, for the water treatment plant. So we did assist the city this year with a number of applications. What we haven't done in the past for a number of years, the city hasn't looked at some of those funding sources, so that was nice to be able to assist Rapid City in those areas. So I'm not sure what else you would like to ask. I'm sure here to answer any questions. We've been very appreciative to the members on the council, your representation. It changes every year a little bit because it's the leadership, and that changes a little bit, but it's been, hopefully for those people that have been on for the last year, since I've kind of taken over, it's been an education process. We do try to bring up a lot of different items in our meetings that a lot of times aren't always out there on the normal radar. So I will answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Blaze. We do have a question from Alderman Karen Gunderson Olson.
Thanks, Blaze. As you talk about Black Hills Council, it'd be helpful, I think, for us to understand the difference between Rapid City's receipt of state funding versus the individual, the smaller communities.
Well, right now, Rapid City doesn't get charged quite the same rate. Ours is at a 94% or make sure I'm speaking up so I don't not going off notes. Right now it's at 90 cents per capita. Rapid City, many years ago, this was well before my time, had a deal worked out with Pennington County where they kind of split that rate a little bit different. And so Rapid City is a little bit lower than that. And I'll also say what we look at is that our assessments from our funding side is about 25% of our budget. We get the rest of it through other contracts, through other work that we do. But those assessments are really kind of what helps us keep the doors open, that constant funding that kind of keeps the doors open. And so from a Rapid City side, there's some history way back, and that was happened under the previous director that I truly don't all understand, because it was prior to my time. But there was some things there that, so you guys don't quite pay the exact same rate. The other thing that kind of comes into this, and we'll probably be changing this here in a couple of years, is we're still using population calculations from 1980. That is what we base our rate on, 1980 populations. It was a decision the board made after the 90 census. I'm not sure why they made that. I think because they were seeing quite a bit of shift in some of the counties, and they made the decision to stay with the 1980 census. But when I said that we started this rate increase in 2005, that was the first time the council increased their assessment rates for about 20 years.
Talk about a little bit about the fact that Rapid City receives funding directly, federal funding directly versus the states who.
The main program, I think what you're talking about, Karen, is the Community Development Block Program. Right. Rapid City and Sioux Falls are the only two entitlement cities in South Dakota that receives their own allocation of Community Development Block funds. The rest of the state, those funds go through the state. And we assist communities outside of Rapid City that can qualify for that funding and get them. One of the main projects that we have going on right now with Community Development Block Grant funds is the Fall River Health Service, the new hospital down at Hot Springs. There's about $500,000 of Community Development Block funds that went into that project. So we help out a lot of those communities that are outside of the city of Rapid City to get access to those type of funds. They have to meet the same kind of criteria that the city has to use for those funds. They have to meet the low to moderate income standards and those type of things and fit within the programs. But yeah, we do assist with that type of stuff outside of the city of Rapid City.
And one more follow-up question. This relationship between Rapid City and the other hills communities, which is essentially what we're talking about, is an important relationship in terms of the realization that we have some common needs throughout western South Dakota, so that a continued relationship with the smaller communities is good for Rapid City as well as, I mean, it's a mutually beneficial relationship that is sustained through the work that Black Hills Council does.
I think we try to look at those regional projects that we can take on that assist both ways. Also, your assessment does help us. While we don't always maybe every year give back 100% to Rapid City, what that really does is helps us assist some of those other smaller communities that really need the assistance. They do not have a planning staff. They do not have a full public works staff, or even sometimes barely a legal staff to really actually help assist. We're that technical assistance agency that they can call up, and we can find them answers, help them out, those type of things, which helps those communities grow, which in the long run helps Rapid City grow at the same time. Because let's face it, they all come, shop, do business in Rapid City. So as the region grows and prospers, Rapid City grows. And that has probably been the thing that we've probably tried to preach the most throughout our history, is that we live and die by the region, not by each individual entity. So as the region prospers, we all prosper.
Thank you, Karen. Next, I have a question from Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Blaze, you and I had visited a while back regarding Black Hills Council local governments, and I want to let you know I'm really impressed with your website.
Thank you.
blackhillscouncil.com. I would encourage the council members to take a look at it. I think that what your organization has perhaps struggled with over the last number of years is people not realizing what you do. And when I first came on the city council, I thought that Black Hills Council of Local Governments was part of the municipal league. I had no idea. And I asked around about what the organization was. Nobody knew. Google didn't show anything. And so I think it's impressive what you've done over the last, I think it's a year or two.
Just going on a year right now. So
I'd also like to say that you've been of good assistance on the landfill task force, which I've been a part of, and I think you've worked very hard to help the city taxpayers get a bang for the buck out of this $30,000. I'm not convinced that it was well spent before. I am convinced that it's well spent now.
Thank you.
So I just want to say that I would like to encourage you to consider publishing the minutes of your board meetings.
Sure.
On the website.
That's one thing that I know we've talked about. We just haven't quite got over that hump yet. You get it up and go. I'll say this much with a website. You get it up and going, and you kind of go, oh, that's nice. Then you start thinking about what's next, and that's some of the things that but that's a good suggestion for that. So.
And then, if you'd be willing to forward us a copy of your overall budget.
We have not put together for the 2010 budget yet. We kind of come in a little bit later than the normal process. I can give you a copy of our 2009 budget, our adopted budget. I'll forward that on. And you won't see any major changes with the 2010, as I've been slowly looking at that, starting putting those numbers together now. We adopt that budget typically in our October meeting, which is will be the third Thursday in October. So that's why I'm just getting in the process of putting that together now.
And the other thing that I understand is that your organization has helped us out indirectly, because instead of the smaller communities calling our staff for assistance, they're calling you. Fair statement?
I won't say that's 100% fair statement, but yeah, we do try to encourage that as much as possible. I will also say there is times when I refer people to your staff. There are situations that I am not 100% familiar with, or anybody else in our staff is, whether that's Mr. Green or Marcia Elkins or Robert Ellis. There's times when there are questions that are beyond us, and I'll be honest, I look at Jason mostly because there are legal questions come in. You know, a lot of times the small town attorneys are pretty good at contractual law, which is probably 99% of the times what they need to do. But when they get into some of the other more governmental side of it, between the municipal league and Jason from a legal opinion, we do use Jason from that aspect of it, because it's one of the few that have that they do it day in and day out. And from a, you know, the small town attorneys, they're just a contractual, and they're out there doing their other stuff on, 90% of the time. So, but yeah, Sam, we do try to help out as much as we can without referring them on to your staff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, for your questions and comments. Next, I'll recognize Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
I also think this is an awesome group. I've been a part of this for the last year, and looks like I've been put on this committee again, which I was pleased. Blaze does an awesome job. I think this group has always done great technical assistance for regional projects in the past and now as well. So I too am in favor of this. Blaze, are you asking for 29 or 30 this year? Because 2009 was 29 and...
It was 29, the same as last year.
So you're looking for 29,000,
Yep.
not, okay. Because it says on here that we're, 2010 was asking for
2940 or something, or 840 or something like that. I don't have the figure right in front of me. Yeah, $29,820.
Thank you. And just to say you're doing a great job, been a part of this. There's many groups from the surrounding areas that come to this meeting, and they have some good discussion. Blazin and this group has done many good things for the surrounding area as well as Rapid City, and thanks to our staff and Blaze, our staff does a great job. We always hear how our staff has helped many of projects in the region, so that's a positive. So it's a team building experience, and it works great, and it has been working great, so thank you, Blaze.
And just one more comment, if I may. I think what you'll see in the next year, we are looking at how we can combine, or whether we physically combine or work together with some of the other regional groups that are out there. That's been kind of my goal also this year, is that we're starting to look at how we can kind of better cooperate with some of these other regional groups. Too often in this area, and I think it's pretty much anywhere, and one of the other planning directors' quote is, anytime you get two people together, they think they can form a new nonprofit because they think they can do it better. I'm just the opposite. I think we need to combine a lot of these groups together and try to get that mass together so we have some synergy there instead of breaking it off into smaller and smaller groups. So you'll see some of that probably also coming forward with us.
Thank you, Blaze. Any further questions? See none? Well, thank you for darting in here, Blaze.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, Council, we got a recap to go through, and we need to go over some dates for the next breakout session. And we got food back there that Mr. Hanks has already eaten without us. Does the council want to take a few minutes to the break, or go through it and have the food afterwards? What's that?
We would take a 10-minute recess.
It's been moved
How about
and
this?
seconded to
We
take
can-
a 10-minute recess and come back. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All
Discussion.
opposed?
We
Ten-
invite Emily
We're
to
going
eat
to take a
lunch with
10-minute
us.
Well, I
recess.
think no's carried it. 10 minutes?
10 minutes. Quarter after 5. Get back here and we'll go.
Really good.
I was going to. Into se- Moved and seconded to come back into session. All in favor, say aye. All opposed?
Want to do this first?
We're back in session. I'll recognize Jim Preston and Pauline Sumption to give us a recap.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two things we'd like to do. First, I'd like to go through the questions that were asked tonight, just be sure that we haven't missed anything, and so I'm going to ask Ms. Sumption to do that.
Okay. Okay. Is everybody ready to hear the questions?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Pauline.
Thank you. To be quite honest, I didn't hear as many questions as we have in the past. I have down here that they would like IT to look at the Microsoft product for the internal use, and I can't remember the name of the program, but Kevin has that down. Also look at what the community resources increase in the 4225 line item was for $10,000. I also have down here how much would the city pay on an individual animal basis with the Humane Society versus the contract that we currently have with them. And then also the request for the overall budget for the Black Hills Council of Local Governments, and understanding that it will be 2009 because they have not approved the 2010 budget yet.
Yes. Jim?
Okay. The next area,
Yes.
unless anybody had any additions or whatever to that.
Anybody have any additions?
Okay. I just wanted to go through the packet information that was handed out earlier. And Ms. Sumption did put all this information together, so she will provide the technical expertise on this. This first page, it looks like this. It has City of Rapid City tax calculation at the top. That was in response to what it was for a typical home, $150,000 home for those 4 years on the annual and the monthly amount, and then it was also taken down to project the 2010 payment based on either with the CPI or without the CPI. And you see those figures there. There are some asterisks there. Essentially, all Ms. Sumption had was the current valuation. As you know, the valuation will change by the next time, so based on that. Do you have
Okay.
any
I do have
additional?
one
Yes, sir.
question from Alderman Ron Whitenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jim, one of the questions I would have would be how much money is being set aside for TIFs in 2010, projected for 2010.
You want to go ahead?
Pauline?
I will actually not get that information from the county until the end of the year, towards November or December. They send me a sheet at that time saying how much we can anticipate to receive in the tax increment financing
How
districts.
about 2009?
I have that information downstairs by TIF. I can put that together for you.
And then with projections of when they'll be paid off.
I would just like to say that we did a TIF presentation here about a month ago.
August 3rd, they had it.
August 3rd? Okay. No, it was sooner than that, wasn't
They had it again, I thought, on the
it? Okay.
3rd.
But anyway, we can get you that same information.
Just if we had it for the budget hearings and the
So
other.
but anyway, it was that spreadsheet that I presented that shows all the tax increment financing and how much is in 2009.
Then I had another question, Jim, and I don't know if you guys are even privy to this information, but we talk about growth, property tax growth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how much of that is new? How much of it is higher assessments? Do we have any idea?
I don't know.
No, say that question. How much of that is new and how much is
Yeah,
what?
how much of it is new building versus how much of it is a higher assessment? Because our mill levy is based upon the assessed value, correct, or the real true value, or whatever it is. But how much of that was increased over last year's valuation when we talk about growth?
When we talk about growth, what we are talking about new construction or essentially remodeling on a current structure, anything that would add value to that, because the base would include any change in the valuation.
Well, to me, then there would be a number missing, and that number would be if I had a house that was worth $150,000 last year, and this year it's worth $152,000. Is there a way to account for that? I suppose we could back the numbers out.
Well, we did present that one sheet that showed a 5% increase in valuation.
So there was a 5% valuation of
And that was based from the
increase.
Director of Equalization.
And that's what they built in before we do anything, correct?
Go ahead.
As of November 1 of each year, they do the overall city valuation. That includes the increase if you do nothing new to your house, what that new valuation will be.
Correct.
That includes the growth of the valuation on growth. And so we don't get that information again along with the calculation of the taxes and towards the end of the year.
So I'm saying in 2008, if I had a $100,000 house, valuation, whatever the mill levy against that was $100,000, they're saying they're going to add 5% to that number, so now my valuation's $105,000.
That was just an estimate that they gave us. It's not necessarily what actually it is going up. They won't know that yet.
Okay.
It's going to
So
depend on the
what did we
market.
budget that number on then for our property tax revenues? What number did we use?
That number was the valuation that I received last year. It was the,
November 1st, isn't it?
as of November 1st of 2008 valuation. I believe that's and I don't have that number with me. It was on that TID report that we handed out, but it is over $400 million is the total valuation.
And then, so do we have a record of that so we can see what kind of, I wanted to back out the growth out of that, like the new items, and just see what the added value assessment was to the taxpayers. I mean, does that make sense? Am I communicating that correctly? That number.
If I understand you correctly, you want to know how much is just based on natural increase in market value, that type of thing.
Yep.
When I get the information from the county, it does not give me information as far as what the growth valuation is. It gives me a % increase.
Okay. Can I have those percentage increases for, like, say, the last, I don't know, to be simple, 3 years? And then, did they give us a projected number for 2010? Or do we just make our own projection?
No, they provide that. County
Okay.
provides that because it's taxes in '09 payable in 2010.
Okay.
And on your revenue sheet, you'll see the actual taxes that they estimate that we'll get based on growth.
We should have that for the last 3 years.
So I'll have actual increase in valuations, actual growth.
The
Okay.
percentage of growth that they provide us, yes.
Okay. That's a separate number than,
CPI?
no, than the actual increase in valuations. Yep, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so now we go on to what
Is there any other questions on that first sheet then?
I see no lights.
Okay,
so-
the next sheet has to do with the stormwater and drainage fee. That question was asked, how much is in each one of those? And that sheet addresses that. I don't think I have to read that to you, but you can see what it is for the storm water and what it is for the drainage. Okay?
Okay.
One of the question was, what was the interdepartmental charges for the attorney's office? That's the third sheet. It looks like this. Has attorney's office up on it. That's your interdepartmental charges. I do want to point out there is a positive number, which is really not a positive number for the attorney, because that's actually what they have to pay out to the IT department for those services provided to the attorney's office.
Okay.
Then, a big question was all the interdepartmental charges, and I believe there's 3 sheets, 4 sheets of that, and it's by cost center, and then the fund is on the left-hand side. The 101 is your general fund, and for example, mayor, right? The first one is the mayor, and it's to the mayor's office from, what is that?
604 is golf, I believe, for Meadowbrook.
Yeah, so 101 is the mayor's office, is that what you said? So we'd write that on there.
That'd be the cost center, so
Okay.
it'd be about the first 10 or whatever they are.
And then you got 105,
That's GIS mapping.
GIS. Yeah.
If-
We'll probably need them numbers to know what those.
If you like, we do have that on a electronic. Tracy made that for me, and I think she can just forward that to all the council.
That'd
Which have
be-
to forward to legal, finance, and forward to public works. Okay? That, we understand, but this is how the information is
Yeah.
provided for us, but we can get you that, and then you can look and see what it is.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Next, we have the contingency.
Contingency usage, the question was how much contingency fund has been used in the general fund budget and the CIP budget. You see under mayor and council 04, there's $263,270 budgeted, and we used $125,638, and that just goes straight down through. You can see 2010. We are proposing to budget $200,000 for the contingency. On the right-hand side, as you can see, a CIP contingency, pretty much static, $350,000. We do not know in 04 and 05, have records for that, but you can see what we have used, and we have, you know, in the CIP contingency, as somebody mentioned the other day, we're probably a little bit more adamant about using those funds to try to get some of these projects done. As I've told you before, in my whining way, we're trying to build fire stations, that kind of stuff out of CIP contingency. So if you want to look next page, you'll see what that is on the contingency. Yes, sir.
I'll recognize Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Do we have a reason why we increased the council budget to 50,000?
Why we increased the what?
Or increased it 50,000 more, since the year before, like 2008 was 33,000 about, and 2009 was 20,000. I was trying to figure out if we didn't really, and weren't using council contingency like we used to, then what was the reason for the increase?
I'll recognize Mayor Hanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, if you actually look, typically it's actually closer to $250,000. Starting in 2004, the council, the mayor and the council contingency was 263. In 2005 was 268. In 2006 was 276. And then we did reduce it in 2009. Basically, there again, dealing with the no-growth budget. I'm just basically trying to get it back up to more of its historical level in case we run into trouble. Keep in mind, it's Jim Preston, I'm sure, is going to remind you before he gets away from talking about contingencies. That's typically where we get our snow removal money if we actually have overruns. And so there again, it was just trying to get back to more of a historic number, very similar to what we had in the past. The other thing to keep in mind is if you actually look at the uses, especially in 2005, they got almost to $250,000. And I just want to make sure that we never have to get into, there again, undesignated cash like we have before, which is actually our reserves.
But if I look in 2007 and 2008, a lot of our stuff that we're buying, like I said, is look at the difference between the have-tos and the wants. So that would make the difference on me taking back the 50,000. Is are we using it for snow removal, or are we using it for wish list? So that's kind of what I was looking at, why we used and what we use contingencies for. Now, if we're talking CIP, I think it's different than council contingency at this point after seeing what we use it for.
That's next on this list.
I'll recognize Jim Preston.
Well, the other thing, is going to follow up on another reason for increases, probably out of my budget. As you may recall, yesterday I briefed that our elections is $36,000. We actually spent about $59,000 this year, and the council agreed to take some of that out of the contingency fund. It's probably more flexibility for the mayor and for you as far as how to spend those funds instead of putting it all in an election. But we do need the funds there because we have been having either runoff elections or additional elections.
So I have a follow-up.
Yes.
So why don't we just make a line item or a fund for elections and put 50,000 in there every year or something on an average, instead of doing a council contingency on it?
Jim Preston.
We have had budgeted up to about 2 or 3 years ago when the council asked us to only budget for one election. We have budgeted for 2 elections.
Okay.
But they essentially a way to, again, be more flexible with these funds that we have. If we don't have elections, no use for it sitting there in the election line items.
Just another follow-up.
Ms. Hadcock.
So is there any way when we're having these elections, so we're not having and spending this much money, how we can do it better on how we're running elections or when those elections are every year?
Jim?
Short answer, yes. The longer answer is I want to run it by the mayor before I would stand up here in front of the council and throw out anything here.
I appreciate that, Jim. Just from seeing the numbers, it seems like that would be something that would be positive to work on, is when and how we are doing elections at that time of year, so.
And the mayor's aware of what I just not have given him the numbers, and it's kind of like one of these things, when we have time, Mayor, we need to sit down and talk about this. And so,
And maybe look at if the ballot machine or anything has anything to do with that, maybe that
It
would be
does.
part of it, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haggard. Next, we have a question from Alderman Ron Wyffenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jim, you'd made a comment about in your whining noise paying for a fire department with CIP funds. I didn't quite catch your drift. So what did you mean?
well, typically in the CIP fund, every year we budget $450,000 for government buildings. In the CIP and in government buildings, $450,000. That does not build you a fire station that typically run about $1.6 million. So we have, 2012 did pay for the one up on Highway 16, but we have built other fire stations, to include one out there on West Chicago, using the CIP funds. And a lot of times what we have to do is you'll look in the CIP, you'll see those are funded over several years, and we heavily use the contingency fund.
What other funds would you use?
2012.
2012 for fire
Yes, sir.
department? Okay. What kind of role would general fund play?
General fund has to pay for the operations of both fire stations. Typically, Chief Rolfing will probably tell you $750,000, $800,000 to fully staff and operate a fire station each year.
As you'd mentioned, talking about 2011 and having that 850 to $1.2 million coming down the pipeline to make sure that it's in the general fund available to funding a fire department.
Yes, I did.
And I didn't catch, what did you said, Haynes or?
It's out on the east side, in some of the areas we've been annexing in the Rapid Valley area. I believe Chief Rolfing can probably speak more intelligently on this, but I think his response time is maybe I better not say that, but it's a little bit higher than the others.
Like 4.5 minutes or something like that?
What's that?
Aren't they shooting for 4.5 minutes? Or 4.2?
Typically 4 minutes.
And usually it's because of growth
Yes, sir.
that we add the fire departments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weidenbach. Next, we have, is it council contingency on there?
Yeah, this is just a list. The question was what typically, and I think Ms. Hadcock's already looked at this as far as typical, some of the things that we have,
Oh,
we
okay.
spent it on, and that's just a list there.
Okay.
The next item is a email from Jerry Wright. This is a response to the question that was on the $2 million. I believe that was addressed earlier
Okay.
during Mr. Ellis's presentation. Okay, and the next one would be the mayor council. I wasn't real sure why this was in there first place, and I had to ask Ms. Sumption, but all that shows is that we backed out the funding for the Black Hills Council of Local Governments and put that into its own cost center.
Okay.
Which is immediately after that.
Which is immediately after that. How's that for me really sounding intelligently? Don't make fun of me, Ron. We all use the resources that we have, and I just happen to have a good one standing to my left. The last thing was, is it the jump?
This is the subsidy, the annual subsidy
Okay.
in the general fund.
Okay.
So all those pages are,
This here, the question was, is what are the annual subsidies in the general fund? And we have used this same items to keep consistent over a number of years, what we call subsidies. So you'll see swimming pools on here, mosquito control, the jail, Black Hills Council of Local Governments, dispatch, and then typically what you would consider typical subsidies like the senior citizens, the Big Brothers, Allied Arts, etc.
okay. Then we have travel regulations.
Yeah, I believe a request was somebody wanted to see what the travel regulations, what the dollar amounts currently look like, because the mayor has proposed, and I think makes real good arguments that we should change that travel policy somewhat
Yes.
to, so it is, we aren't coming to you for, you could say nickel dimes, but I mean, not a lot of funds.
Okay, so we got that. And that's the end of that. Does the council have anything else, any other information they'd like to request?
Assumption of something.
Oh, excuse me.
There were some other items that were requested that are either not, I have not received all the information on, or that I've emailed out to you. As you're aware, I emailed out the Excel version of the budget book. I also emailed out today actual spent to date for 2009. It's over 300 pages on one of those attachments, so I didn't think they would be in the best interest to sit and make copies of all that, so for you to look at and to recognize Aaron's need to save paper. I am waiting on information from Growth Management on the 10-year history of their workload, inspections, and permits. I am waiting on information also from them on their shifting of employees so that you guys can have that in writing. We are going to look at the FTE count again. I have not received information from all the department heads on that, and we want to confirm those numbers. And then from Tuesday night, when Jerry said that the $22,000 for deer control was not in his budget, I spoke with Tracy today, and she showed me the calculation for the salaries, and it actually is included in the budget, so that should not be an issue. He is also still working on the per-user supplement for each of the pools and golf. I have an email into Don Brumbaugh on the annual cost of the mayor's vehicle, which was a request, and because they do not have a fleet coordinator right now, they're struggling to come up with that. And yes, he's back to being a cop. Steve has volunteered to send him back over to figure it out. And I think that is all. So there are still some pending items.
The current department hasn't released the new fleet manager.
We like to keep her for a little while longer.
Does the council have anything else they wish to have looked up? Or if they do, they can email Kay to get it to us so we can have it for the breakout session. We need to set a date for the breakout session. We do have council next Monday night. So we're looking at the 18th. Tuesday, the 18th. Would that work for anybody? Do we need to, we do have a bye week through the 24th through the 28th, if the council would like to make up 2 meetings that week. But we do have policy committee out of town in Pierre for 2 days tomorrow, or next week, actually the 19th, 20th, and you got to give them Friday for the people that are going to be gone from there. I'll recognize Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you. I'd like to make the request that we see if Kay is willing to contact. I don't have access to my schedule right here, and so I'm unable to commit to dates without having that handy. And I can commit tomorrow to dates, but I can't commit right now. So I would prefer that we wait until tomorrow and see if we can contact the council members with some dates and go from there.
I think we can definitely do that. I think we need to pick some times tonight, what works for people. You know, we did this 3 to 7. Is that comfortable for people? Or when we send Kay out this, we'll do a 3 to 7, 5 to 9. Pick and take the ones with the biggest. Okay. I'll recognize Alderwoman Karen Olson.
Wait, if I could finish.
Oh, excuse me, Karen. Sam had a follow-up.
I'd just like to say that the later in the evening, the better it works for me. But.
Okay, it's 2. Okay, Karen Olson.
I was just going to suggest we meet the week there's not council meetings.
Okay. Mayor Hanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a reminder, we don't have all the details, but Tom Hitty's funeral will be on Tuesday, the 18th. We're not sure if it's a morning or an afternoon funeral at this point. All we know is we have a date and we have a location. But if it turns out to be an afternoon funeral, that could create some conflict, especially with a lot of the department directors who'd like to attend. So
Okay, thank you, Mr. A. Next, I'll recognize Bill Wall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next week will not work for me. I will not be in Rapid City next week. Thank you.
Okay. Next, I'll recognize Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Just going to echo Karen's comments about that week of the 24th, I believe it is. It seems as if, if we send out some messages from Kay with blocks of time, like 3 to 7, like you said, 5 to 9, later in the evening, whatever, 2 or 3 blocks of time on 2 or 3 different days, I think that week could work, probably for the vast majority of us. Starting with the 24th. Okay. Scratch that, what I said, just everything I just said.
Okay.
Can I just say one other comment?
Sure.
I think the plan is that the finance office will have some first reading of the appropriations ready for the legal and finance meeting on the 2nd of September, regardless of what we do here. They will have something ready to go so that we can at least get first reading done. We'll have that then ready to go for the meeting on the 8th, and then it would be the hopes that we could have a budget approved by the second council meeting in September, but if not, then we can have some time there to have a special council meeting if we need to, but hopefully we won't need to.
Thank you. I'll give Kate some directions to do that tomorrow. I'm going to ask her to ask about the 18th in the late evening and check with the 24th and get the responses what we get. Since we got a lot of council members gone, we'll have to work through it. Anything else from finance?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you guys for all your work. It's been moved to adjourn, seconded. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, motion carries.